The billionaire entered the wrong bedroom and found himself staring down the barrel of a Block 19, held by a woman whose eyes showed no fear, only deadly calculation, who would save his life before the night was over. Grant Winters had been running on 3 hours of sleep for the past week. The divorce papers sat on his desk like a death sentence, and the Henderson deal was bleeding money faster than he could count. At 2:17 a.m., his penthouse felt more like a prison than a palace. Have you ever walked into the wrong room and changed your entire life? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. He pushed through what he thought was his bedroom door, muscle memory guiding him in the darkness. The exhaustion hit him like a wall. All he wanted was to collapse in a bed and forget that his ex-wife's lawyer had called him a heartless bastard in front of half of Manhattan's elite. The sound came first. Metal sliding against leather. Quick, professional, deadly. Then the voice. Low, controlled, absolutely certain. Don't move. Grant's blood turned to ice. He raised his hands slowly, his business mind already calculating exit strategies and ransom demands. But when he turned around, nothing could have prepared him for what he saw. A woman stood 3 feet away, weapon trained on his chest with the kind of steadiness that only came from years of practice. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't scared. Her dark eyes assessed him like a predator measuring prey. You picked the wrong house, she said. Wait, Grant started, but she was already moving. The world flipped upside down in seconds. One moment he was standing, the next he was on the marble floor with her knee pressed against his back and her arm locked around his throat. The chokehold was perfect, professional, designed to control without killing. I'm not a burglar, he gasped against the pressure. That's what they all say. Her voice was right next to his ear, breath warm against his neck. Even through the fear, Grant's body registered things it shouldn't. The way she smelled like vanilla and steel. How her thighs pressed against his ribs with coiled strength. The fact that she could have killed him already, but chose restraint. I live here, he managed. Nobody lives here except me and my boss. The pressure increased slightly, and Grant felt his vision start to blur. But then something clicked in her voice. Recognition. Doubt. Boss, he wheezed. Grant Winters. This is my penthouse. The hold loosened immediately. Not released, but softened. She was thinking now, processing. You're supposed to be in Dubai. Flight got canceled. I came home. Silence stretched between them. Grant could feel her heart beating against his shoulder blade, could sense her mental calculations. Then, slowly, she let him go. He rolled over, gasping, and got his first clear look at her face. Beautiful wasn't the right word. Dangerous was closer. She had the kind of features that stopped traffic and started wars, but it was her eyes that held him. Intelligence burned there, along with something else. Challenge. Tasha Williams, she said, not lowering the gun. Your new assistant. Held of a first impression. You walked into my bedroom. Grant looked around, really seeing the space for the first time. Her laptop on the desk. Her clothes folded neatly on the chair. Her gun, which she was now holstering with practiced ease. I thought this was the guest room. It is. I'm the guest. She moved to the window, peering through the blinds with professional paranoia. That's when Grant noticed her body language shift. Tension flooded her frame like electricity. We have a problem, she said. Besides you nearly killing me, that was just foreplay. Her eyes locked on his, and something hot and dangerous passed between them. Someone's watching this building. Red laser, northwest corner. Professional grade. Grant's business instincts kicked in immediately. Divorce lawyers don't use snipers. No, but your ex-wife's new boyfriend might. The words hit him like a physical blow. What do you know about Marcus? Tasha turned from the window, and Grant saw something in her expression that made his chest tight. Not fear, excitement. The kind a predator felt when it found worthy prey. I know he's connected to people who solve problems permanently. I know your divorce settlement included some very interesting real estate holdings. And I know that red that has been circling this building for the past 20 minutes. How do you know all this? She smiled. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing Grant had ever seen. Because 3 days ago, someone paid me $50,000 to get close to you. They wanted intel on your security, your habits, your weaknesses. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see gold flecks in her brown eyes. But they made one mistake. What's that? They assumed I'd stay bought. The world shifted beneath Grant's feet. Nothing made sense anymore. His assistant was a hired spy who had just saved his life while holding him at gunpoint in her bedroom. The woman who could kill him with her bare hands was now offering to protect him. Why, he asked. Tasha looked him up and down, her gaze lingering in places that made his pulse race despite everything. Because, Mr. Winters, you're much more interesting than they said you'd be. What would you do if someone broke into your space? How would you handle being completely overpowered? Tell me in the comments below. As Tasha released her grip and stepped back, Grant noticed something that made his blood freeze. A red laser dancing across the window behind her. Someone else was watching, and they weren't alone. She had him at gunpoint, but he was the one making the offer she couldn't refuse. The red that disappeared the moment Tasha spotted it. But the message was clear. They were being hunted. Kill the lights, she commanded, moving with fluid precision toward the wall switch. Grant didn't argue. The penthouse plunged into darkness, leaving only the city's glow filtering through the windows. In the dim light, Tasha transformed into something primal, dangerous. She moved like smoke, checking sight lines and exit routes with military efficiency. "How many people want you dead?" she asked, pulling curtains closed with quick, silent movements. "That's a longer conversation. Give me the short version." Grant watched her work, fascinated despite the danger. Every movement was calculated, purposeful. She wasn't just beautiful. She was lethal poetry in motion. "My ex-wife stands to inherit everything if I die before the divorce is final. My business partner thinks I stole his biggest client. And there's a Russian developer who believes I cost him $200 million. Anyone else? That's just this week." Tasha paused in her reconnaissance, turning those dark eyes on him. Even in the shadows, he felt exposed under her gaze. "You live like this every day, surrounded by people who want to destroy you. It's the price of success." Success. She said the word like it tasted bitter. "Is that what you call sleeping 3 hours a night and trusting no one?" The question cut deeper than it should have. Grant had built his empire on the principle that everyone had a price. Everyone could be bought or broken. But this woman, she'd just proven that theory wrong. "What's your price, Tasha?" She moved closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume mixed with the metallic scent of adrenaline. Close enough to see the pulse beating in her throat. "That depends on what you're buying. Protection. Loyalty. Someone who thinks 5 moves ahead when everyone else is stuck on move 1. I already have a job. With people who want me dead. I had a job." Her correction was soft, but it hit like thunder. Past tense. "Why?" She reached up, her fingers grazing his jaw as she tilted his face toward the window. Her touch was electric, setting every nerve ending on fire. "See that building across the street? 42nd floor, corner office." Grant looked where she pointed. A faint light glowed behind darkened windows. "Someone's been watching you for weeks. Taking photos, documenting your routine. They know what time you eat breakfast, what gym you use, which elevator you prefer." Her hand slid down to rest against his chest, directly over his racing heart. "They know you sleep on the left side of the bed and drink your coffee black." "How do you?" "Because I was supposed to be gathering that information for them." The admission hung between them like a loaded weapon. Grant should have been furious, should have called security, should have put distance between himself and this dangerous woman. Instead, he found himself stepping closer. "But you're not." "No." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm not." "What changed?" Tasha's eyes searched his face in the darkness, as if she was looking for something she hadn't expected to find. "You did." The words were simple, but they carried weight that made Grant's chest tight. He'd spent years building walls, protecting himself from exactly this kind of vulnerability. But standing here in the dark with a woman who could kill him or save him, those walls felt suddenly fragile. "I don't understand." "Join the club." She moved away, breaking the spell, returning to her tactical assessment. 3 hours ago, you were just another mark. Rich, powerful, probably corrupt. The The kind of man who thinks money solves everything. It usually does. But when I put you on that floor, you didn't threaten me. You didn't offer to double whatever they were paying. You didn't try to buy your way out. She turned back to him, and he saw something raw in her expression. You just lay there and let me figure out you were telling the truth. Would threats have worked? No, but most men in your position don't know that. Grant felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that went deeper than attraction or gratitude. This woman saw him clearly. Not the public image, not the carefully constructed facade, but something real underneath. So what happens now? Tasha checked her watch, then moved to the window again, peering through a gap in the curtains. Now you decide if you trust me enough to stay alive. And if I do, then we disappear whoever's trying to kill you, and we do it before breakfast. The casual way she said it, like murder was just another item on her to-do list, should have terrified him. Instead, Grant felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Safety. Not the kind that came from money or power, but the primitive certainty that came from having a predator on your side. What do you need from me? Everything. Every enemy. Every secret. Every reason someone might want you gone. She turned away from the window, and in the dim light, she looked like an avenging angel. And I need you to do exactly what I say. When I say it, no questions asked. That's not how I work. It is now. She moved closer again, and Grant could see the gold flecks in her eyes, even in the darkness. Because the alternative is being dead by sunrise. Have you ever met someone who matched your energy instantly? Someone who challenged you from the first moment? Share your experience below. When Tasha agreed to his proposal, Grant felt something shift inside his chest. Not just relief, but hunger. As she outlined her security plan, her fingers tracing patterns on his window, he realized the greatest threat to his control might not be outside. It might be standing right next to him. The woman who put him on the floor last night was now sitting at his breakfast table like she owned the place. And somehow, that didn't bother him at all. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning Manhattan into a glittering maze of glass and steel. Grant had managed 3 hours of sleep on his couch, but Tasha looked like she'd been awake all night. Her laptop was open beside her coffee cup, screens full of data he couldn't read from across the room. She was wearing one of his shirts. The sight hit him harder than it should have. The white cotton hung loose on her frame, sleeves rolled up to reveal toned forearms, collar open just enough to show the curve of her throat. Her own clothes were presumably still drying after last night's rain. "Good morning," he said, trying to sound normal. "Is it?" She didn't look up from her screen. "Depends on how you feel about having your entire life dissected before your first cup of coffee." Grant poured himself coffee, hyper-aware of her presence in his space. She moved through his kitchen like she'd been there for years, not hours. When he reached around her for sugar, she didn't flinch. When their fingers brushed as she handed him a spoon, electricity shot up his arm. "What did you find?" "Your ex-wife is more creative than I gave her credit for." Tasha turned the laptop toward him. "She's not just after your money. She wants your reputation destroyed first." The screen showed a web of connections, photos, financial records, phone logs. Grant's life reduced to data points and evidence trails. "These photos were taken 6 weeks ago," Tasha continued, pointing to surveillance shots of him entering various buildings around the city. "Someone's been building a case that you're involved in money laundering for Russian oligarchs." "That's insane." "Is it?" Her eyes met his, direct and challenging. "Because the paper trail says otherwise. Shell companies, overseas accounts, real estate purchases that don't make economic sense." Grant studied the evidence, his business mind already identifying the problem. The pattern was too clean, too obvious. Like someone had wanted it to be found. "It's a setup, obviously, but a good one." Tasha closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair. "Tell me about Dallas." The subject change caught him off guard. "What? You said last night that you knew I was from Dallas." "How?" "Your accent. It slips through sometimes." "What else do you know about me?" Grant sat down across from her, studying her face in the morning light. She was even more beautiful than he'd realized, but it was her intelligence that captivated him. The way she processed information, connected dots, saw patterns that others missed. "You were a cop." Military before that. Probably Marines based on how you move. You've killed people, but it doesn't keep you awake at night. You're here because someone you care about needs money, and private security pays better than public service. Tasha's expression didn't change, but Grant caught the slight tightening around her eyes. He'd hit close to home. Not bad, she said. What else? You don't trust easily, but when you do, it's absolute. You've been betrayed before, probably by someone in authority. And you're not just protecting me from money anymore. What makes you think that? Grant leaned forward, drawn by the challenge in her voice. Because if you were still working for them, I'd already be dead. Maybe I'm playing a longer game. Maybe you are. He reached across the table, his fingers covering hers. But you're not. The touch was electric. Tasha didn't pull away, but he could see her internal battle playing out in her eyes. Professional distance warring with something more primal. You don't know me, she said softly. I know enough. His thumb traced across her knuckles, noting the small scars that spoke of violence survived. I know you could have walked away last night with $50,000 and no complications. Instead, you chose the harder path. Maybe I just like challenges. Maybe you do. He lifted her hand, studying the calluses on her palm. Tell me about your family. For the first time since he'd met her, Tasha hesitated. Vulnerability flashed across her face before she could hide it. My brother. He's sick. Experimental treatment that insurance won't cover. How much? More than a cop makes in 5 years. Grant understood now. The missing piece that explained everything. She wasn't just a mercenary. She was a sister fighting for someone she loved. Is he the reason you left Dallas? He's the reason I do a lot of things. Grant stood up, moving to the window. The city sprawled below them, millions of people fighting their own battles, making their own impossible choices. I have enemies, he said without turning around. Real ones. People who won't hesitate to hurt anyone close to me to get what they want. I can handle myself. It's not about what you can handle. He faced her again, struck by how small she looked in his shirt, how the morning light caught the gold in her skin. It's about what I can live with. Tasha stood too, moving toward him with predatory grace. She stopped just close enough that he could feel her body heat, smell the vanilla scent of her hair. What are you saying? I'm saying that keeping you safe might be more important to me than keeping myself alive. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Grant had never said anything like that to another person, had never felt the bone-deep certainty that someone else's survival mattered more than his own. That's a dangerous way to think, Tasha said. Yeah. He reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. It is. Have you ever felt someone see through all your walls in just one conversation? Someone who understood your motivations before you explained them? Tell me about a time when someone surprised you by really seeing you. Her phone rang before either of them could move closer, the sharp sound cutting through the tension like a blade. When Tasha answered, her face went pale. We have a problem, she said, hanging up. Your ex-wife just filed for an emergency restraining order. She's claiming you threatened her life. The accusation hit the morning news before Grant finished his second cup of coffee, and by noon, his lawyer was calling him a walking liability. This is bad, Grant. Marcus Webb's voice crackled through the speakerphone, panic barely contained beneath his professional tone. Victoria's claiming you hired private security to intimidate her. She has photos of armed personnel at your building. Grant looked at Tasha, who was monitoring 3 different news feeds on her laptop while simultaneously tracking social media mentions of his name. Even in crisis mode, she moved with fluid efficiency that made his pulse race. What photos? You don't know. Marcus's voice climbed an octave. Check channel 7. Tasha pulled up the news feed without being asked. The screen filled with grainy surveillance footage of her entering Grant's building, timestamp clearly visible. The caption read, "Billionaire hires armed bodyguard amid divorce battle." That was taken from the building across the street, Tasha said quietly. The same one where her sniper friend was posted last night. Grant felt pieces clicking into place like a deadly puzzle. They're not trying to kill me. They're trying to frame me.
For what? Domestic terrorism, witness intimidation, conspiracy. Marcus's voice grew more frantic with each charge. Victoria's lawyers are painting a picture of an unstable man using mercenaries to threaten his ex-wife. Tasha closed the laptop with control violence. I need to leave. Now, before this gets worse. No. The word came out harder than Grant intended. Tasha turned those dark eyes on him, and he saw something that made his chest tight. She was already gone, mentally packing her bags and disappearing into whatever shadows had hidden her before. You don't understand, she said. My presence here makes you look guilty. Your presence here is the only reason I'm still alive. Is it worth your freedom? Grant stood up, moving close enough to see the conflict playing out in her expression. She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to disappear before the situation exploded. But something held her back. You tell me, he said. Is my life worth fighting for? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Tasha's breathing had changed, shallow and quick, like she was preparing for battle. This isn't about your life anymore, she whispered. It's about everything else. Everything else? Instead of answering, she moved to the window, peering through the blinds with practiced paranoia. But this time Grant followed. When he stepped behind her, close enough that his chest almost touched her back, she didn't pull away. They're not just trying to destroy your reputation, she said, her voice barely audible. They're trying to make you dependent on them. I don't follow. Tasha turned in the narrow space between him and the window, bringing them face to face. The intensity in her eyes made breathing difficult. Think like a predator, not prey. If you're accused of hiring dangerous people, what's the solution? Fire the dangerous people. And then? Grant's mind raced ahead, seeing the trap. Hire lawyers they recommend. Use security companies they approve. Surround myself with people who report back to them. Until you're completely isolated from anyone who might actually protect you. The realization hit him like cold water. This wasn't about money or revenge. It was about control. They wanted him alive, but powerless, surrounded by enemies disguised as allies. How long have you known? Since I saw the news footage. Tasha's hand came up to rest against his chest, directly over his racing heart. The angles were too perfect, the timing too convenient. Someone wanted me on camera. But you stayed. I stayed. The admission was soft, but it carried weight that made Grant's knees weak. She'd known it was a trap, known that staying would make her a target, and she'd chosen him anyway. Why? Tasha's fingers spread against his shirt, and Grant could feel the heat of her palm burning through the cotton. When she looked up at him, her usual armor was gone, leaving something raw and honest that took his breath away. Because 3 years ago, I watched my partner die because he trusted the wrong person, someone we both thought was on our side. Her voice cracked slightly. I swore I'd never let that happen again. Grant reached up, cupping her face in his hands. Her skin was soft as silk, but warm as summer, and when she leaned into his touch, something fundamental shifted in his chest. I'm not your partner. No, she agreed, her eyes never leaving his. You're something else entirely. What am I? The question came out rougher than he intended, loaded with need he didn't know how to hide. Tasha's lips parted slightly, and Grant could see her pulse beating fast in her throat. You're the first person in 3 years who looked at me and saw strength instead of damage. Tasha, you're the first man who didn't try to save me or break me. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. You just saw me. Grant's control, already stretched thin by danger and adrenaline, finally snapped. He kissed her with weeks of suppressed hunger, months of loneliness, years of keeping everyone at arm's length. She kissed him back with equal desperation, her body pressing against his like she was trying to crawl inside his skin. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Grant realized they'd crossed a line neither could uncross. This complicates things, Tasha whispered against his lips. Everything worthwhile is complicated. She laughed, the sound breathless and real. Is that your business philosophy? It's my life philosophy. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. Tasha glanced at the screen, and her entire body went rigid. We need to leave. Now. What is it? She showed him the text. Building surrounded. Back exit compromised. You have 10 minutes before they move in. Grant felt ice replace the heat in his veins. Who sent this? Someone who's either trying to save us or kill us. Tasha was already moving, grabbing weapons and equipment with military precision. Want to find out which? Do you believe in trusting your instincts even when logic says run? Have you ever chosen loyalty over safety? Tell me in the comments what you would do. As sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer by the second, Grant realized that the woman who'd put him in a chokehold 12 hours ago was now the only thing standing between him and destruction. The question was, would 10 minutes be enough to escape the trap that had been months in the making? They had 8 minutes to disappear before 20 federal agents kicked down his door, and Tasha was stripping out of his shirt like she had all the time in the world. What are you doing? Grant stared as she pulled on tactical gear with fluid precision. Black pants, boots, a form-fitting vest that made her look like deadly poetry in motion. Becoming someone else. She tossed him a bag. Change. Now. Into what? A man who doesn't live here. Grant looked in the bag. Construction clothes, work boots, a hard hat. The kind of gear that made wealthy men invisible in their own buildings. They're watching the exits, he said, pulling on the unfamiliar clothes. All the obvious ones. Tasha clipped a radio to her belt, her movements sharp and focused. But they're not watching the service tunnels. What service tunnels? She looked at him like he was missing something fundamental about his own building. The ones that connect every major building in this district. How do you think they move supplies during peak hours? Grant had owned the penthouse for 3 years and never thought about infrastructure. But Tasha had been here 3 days and already knew every exit, every blind spot, every weakness in his fortress. You studied the blueprints. I studied everything. She moved to a section of wall that looked identical to every other section, pressing something that made a panel slide away. Rule 1 of protection. Always have 3 ways out. Beyond the hidden door lay a narrow corridor that smelled like concrete and machine oil. Service lights cast everything in harsh shadows, and Grant could hear the hum of massive ventilation systems. How did you know about this? Former cop, remember? We learn buildings the same way doctors learn bodies. She handed him a flashlight and started moving down the corridor with confident strides. Every structure has arteries, pressure points, ways to make it bleed. They moved through the building's hidden anatomy in silence, Tasha leading with the sure-footed grace of someone who'd memorized every turn. Grant found himself watching the way she moved, efficient, deadly, beautiful in a way that made his chest tight despite everything. Where does this connect? 3 blocks south. Building under construction. She paused at an intersection, checking her watch. We'll surface in the parking garage, grab a vehicle, and disappear before they realize we're gone. And then Tasha turned to look at him. In the harsh light of the service tunnel, she looked like a warrior queen planning a campaign. Then we find out who's really behind this. And we make them pay. The simplicity of her declaration should have been terrifying. Instead, Grant felt something hot and primitive surge through his veins. This woman didn't just protect, she hunted. And right now, he wanted nothing more than to watch her work. They reached the exit point, a maintenance room filled with pipes and electrical panels. Tasha checked her phone, then put it away with grim satisfaction. Building's clear, but we have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind where my contact just sent me security footage from your penthouse. She showed him the screen. They didn't come to arrest you. They came to plant evidence. Grant watched federal agents methodically placing items throughout his home. Documents, weapons, electronic devices that definitely didn't belong to him. They're framing me for something bigger than domestic terrorism. Arms dealing, by the look of it. Tasha's voice was cold as winter. Military-grade equipment, international connections, enough evidence to put you away for life. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't about his divorce or his business deals. Someone wanted him completely destroyed, his reputation in ashes, his freedom gone forever. Who benefits if I disappear? Everyone who's ever wanted a piece of your empire. Tasha led him through the parking garage toward a nondescript sedan. But someone this organized, this thorough? This is personal. They reached the car. and Tasha popped the locks with practiced ease. Grant didn't ask how she'd acquired the vehicle or why she had keys. Some questions were better left unasked. Where are we going? Somewhere they won't look for us. She started the engine, and Grant noticed her hands were perfectly steady despite everything they'd just survived. Somewhere we can think clearly. As they pulled out of the garage, Grant caught a glimpse of federal vehicles surrounding his building. Flashing lights, news trucks, the whole circus of public destruction. My life is over, he said quietly. Tasha glanced at him, and something in her expression made his pulse race. Not pity or sympathy, but something fiercer, something that looked like hunger. Your old life is over, she corrected. The one where you play by their rules, where you let them set the terms. She took a turn that led them away from Manhattan, toward the industrial districts of Queens. But you're not the same man who walked into the wrong bedroom last night. What am I now? She pulled into an abandoned warehouse district, the kind of place where people disappeared and questions went unanswered. When she turned off the engine, the silence felt loaded with possibility and danger. Now you're a man with nothing left to lose. She leaned across the console, close enough that he could see gold flecks in her dark eyes. And that makes you the most dangerous kind of enemy they could have created. What do we do? Tasha's smile was sharp as a blade and twice as deadly. We hunt them back. The words sent heat straight to his core, primal and electric. Grant realized that somewhere between the chokehold and the chase, between the accusations and the escape, he'd stopped being a victim. He'd become something else entirely. I don't know how to be a hunter. Lucky for you, Tasha said, her lips brushing against his ear. I'm an excellent teacher. Have you ever had to completely reinvent yourself to survive? When your back was against the wall, did you discover strength you didn't know you had? Share your story of transformation below. As they sat in the darkened car, surrounded by the ruins of industrial America, Grant felt something shift in his chest. The businessman who'd built an empire through contracts and negotiations was gone. In his place sat someone harder, hungrier, willing to break rules he'd never even considered bending. And the woman beside him, she wasn't just his protector anymore. She was his partner in something that felt like war. The warehouse smelled like motor oil and broken dreams, but Tasha moved through it like she owned the place. Grant followed her past rusted machinery and abandoned workstations, trying to process how quickly his life had transformed. 12 hours ago, he'd been worried about stock prices and legal fees. Now he was learning how to disappear. This is home for the next few days, Tasha said, flipping on battery-powered lanterns that cast everything in harsh white light. Home was generous. The space had been cleared out except for basic furniture, a table, 2 chairs, a mattress in the corner. But it had windows that provided sight lines in all directions and exits that led to a maze of abandoned buildings. How did you find this place? I didn't find it. I created it. She opened a metal case that contained enough weapons to outfit a small army. Been preparing safe houses since I got to New York. Never know when you'll need to disappear fast. Grant watched her check each weapon with professional efficiency. Pistols, rifles, things he couldn't even identify. The woman who'd worn his shirt that morning was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she could take on the entire federal government single-handed. You've been planning this. Not this specifically. She loaded a magazine with practiced ease. But something like it. Men like you don't survive long without making enemies. I just prepared for the inevitable. Men like me. Tasha looked up from her weapons, and Grant saw something in her eyes that made his pulse race. Not judgment, but assessment. Like she was deciding whether to trust him with the truth. Rich, powerful, used to getting what you want through money and influence. She stood up, moving closer. The kind of man who thinks the rules don't apply to him. And now you're about to learn what happens when the rules stop protecting you. She handed him a pistol, and Grant felt the weight of it like a physical challenge. He'd never held a gun before, never needed to. His battles had always been fought in boardrooms and courtrooms, with lawyers and accountants as weapons. I don't know how to use this. You will. Tasha moved behind him, her body pressing against his back as she adjusted his grip. First lesson, assume everyone wants to kill you. Her breath was warm against his neck, her hands guiding his with firm confidence. Grant tried to focus on her instructions, but her proximity was doing things to his concentration that had nothing to do with firearms training. Second lesson, she continued, her lips almost brushing his ear. Trust no one except the person watching your back. And who's watching my back? Right now? Me. She stepped away, leaving him cold despite the warehouse's stale air. But that could change. Will it? The question came out more vulnerable than he intended. Tasha studied his face in the lantern light, and Grant felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with their current danger. That depends on how fast you learn. Learn what? How to be someone they can't predict. She moved to the windows, checking sight lines with automatic precision. Your ex-wife, your business partners, everyone who thinks they know you, they're all operating from the same playbook. Rich man gets scared. Rich man calls lawyers. Rich man tries to buy his way out. What's wrong with that approach? It's what they're counting on. Tasha turned back to him, and in the harsh light, she looked like an avenging angel. They've already neutralized your lawyers, frozen your accounts, turned your allies against you. Every move you would normally make just tightens the noose. Grant felt the walls closing in, options disappearing like smoke. But instead of panic, something else surged through his chest. Something that felt like freedom. So what do? We become ghosts. We learn everything about them while they waste time looking for the man you used to be. She opened another case, this one full of electronics that looked military grade. And when we're ready, we strike back. Ow! Tasha smiled, and the expression was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. By giving them exactly what they deserve. She powered up a laptop that definitely hadn't come from any store Grant recognized. The screen filled with data streams, surveillance feeds, communication intercepts that should have been impossible for a civilian to access. How did you get this equipment? Former partner owed me a favor. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with the same deadly efficiency she brought to everything else. The kind of favor that comes with no questions asked. Grant moved closer, drawn by the information flowing across the screen. Financial records, phone logs, security footage, a digital map of the conspiracy that had destroyed his life. This is everything. This is just the beginning. Tasha pulled up a photo that made Grant's blood run cold. Your ex-wife's new boyfriend isn't just connected to dangerous people. He is dangerous people. The image showed Marcus Webb in a conference room with men Grant recognized from international news. Arms dealers, money launderers, the kind of people who solve problems with violence instead of lawyers. How long has this been planned? Months, maybe longer. Tasha scrolled through communication logs that painted a picture of systematic destruction. They didn't just want your money. They wanted your entire network, your business connections, your reputation as collateral damage. Why? Because dead martyrs are harder to control than living assets. She turned to face him, and Grant saw something in her expression that made breathing difficult. They needed you discredited, desperate, dependent on them for survival. But something went wrong. Yeah, her voice was soft, but it carried weight that made his chest tight. Me. The admission hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Grant realized that this woman hadn't just saved his life. She'd given him the chance to save himself. What happens now? Tasha closed the laptop and moved toward him with predatory grace. When she stopped, she was close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin. Now you decide who you want to be. The man who built an empire by playing their game, or someone they never saw coming. What if I don't know how to be someone else? Then I'll teach you. Her hand came up to rest against his chest, directly over his racing heart. But it won't be easy, and it won't be safe. Will you stay? Then don't do anything stupid. She pulled back to look at him, and Grant saw both love and determination in her expression. We finish this together, or not at all. Together. Promise me. Grant kissed her instead of answering, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he saw that she understood his inability to make that promise. Some things were worth any risk, even the risk of becoming someone she couldn't love. How far would you go to protect someone you loved? At what point does protecting someone become destroying yourself? Share your thoughts on love and transformation below. As they sat in the abandoned lot, holding each other against an uncertain future, Grant realized they were approaching a crossroads. The evidence they'd gathered could end their war safely, systematically. But the man he was becoming wanted something more primitive: total victory, complete destruction of anyone who'd threatened them. The question was whether the woman in his arms could love both versions of him, or if saving her would mean losing her forever. The warehouse felt different when they returned, charged with electricity that had nothing to do with the storm building outside and everything to do with the decision hanging between them. Tasha spread the evidence across the table like tarot cards predicting their future: financial records, surveillance footage, recorded conversations that could destroy their enemies with surgical precision. "This is enough," she said, organizing files with military efficiency. "Marcus Webb, Dmitry Volkov, even your ex-wife. We can expose the entire conspiracy. Let the legal system handle justice." Grant studied the documents, seeing months of careful planning reduced to data points and evidence trails. Clean, professional, safe. The kind of victory that came through institutions and proper channels. How long before they're arrested? Weeks. Maybe months if they have good lawyers. Tasha pulled up financial projections on her laptop. But the asset freezing starts immediately. Marcus loses access to your accounts. Victoria's divorce settlement disappears. The Russians get cut off from their money laundering operation. And we're free. You're free. She looked up from the screen, and Grant saw something complicated in her expression. Your legal troubles disappear with the evidence of the frame-up. You can reclaim your identity, rebuild your empire, go back to the life you had before. The words should have brought relief. Instead, Grant felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What about you?" Tasha's smile was sad and beautiful and final. "I go back to being a ghost. New identity, new city, new client who needs someone expendable." "No." The word came out harder than Grant intended, but the thought of losing her made his vision blur with panic. She'd saved his life, transformed him, shown him what it meant to fight for something beyond money and power. "This isn't permanent," she said gently. "You hired me to keep you alive, and I did. Contract complete. Forget the contract." Grant moved around the table toward her, driven by desperate need. "I'm not talking about professional obligations." "Then what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I love you. I'm talking about the fact that you're the first person who ever saw me clearly. I'm talking about building something together that's stronger than anything we could create alone." Tasha stood to meet him, but instead of moving closer, she took a step back. The distance felt like a physical blow. "You love who you think I am," she said quietly. "You love the woman who saved you, who trained you, who made you feel powerful and dangerous. But that's not who I really am." "Then show me who you really are." "You saw who I am in that coffee shop." Her voice was steady, but Grant caught the slight tremor underneath. "You saw me watch you threaten a man with torture and not stop you. You saw me plan tactical strikes and evidence gathering like it was a game. I saw you protect us both. You saw me enjoy it." The admission hung between them like a confession. "I liked watching you become someone who could hurt them back. I liked seeing you willing to break rules, cross lines, become dangerous for me." Grant reached for her, but she moved away again, putting the table between them like a barrier. "That's not love," she continued. "That's fascination. It's the excitement of violence dressed up as romance." "You're wrong." "Am I?" Tasha pulled up security footage from the coffee shop on her laptop. "Look at yourself. Watch your body language when you threatened Marcus." Grant saw himself on screen, calm, controlled, radiating menace like it was natural. The man in the video looked nothing like the businessman who'd stumbled into the wrong bedroom a week ago. This version was harder, hungrier, completely comfortable with the promise of violence. "You see it now?" Tasha asked. "How much you've changed. I see someone who learned to fight back. You see someone who discovered he likes fighting." She closed the laptop with control violence. "And that terrifies me." "Why?" "Because I've been down this road before." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've watched good men become monsters because they thought violence was the answer to everything." Grant felt pieces clicking into place, her scars, her training, the way she moved through the world like someone who'd seen too much. Your partner, in Dallas, started out just like you. Good man, strong moral compass, willing to bend rules to protect people he cared about. Tasha's hands trembled as she spoke. By the end, he was planting evidence on suspects, beating confessions out of witnesses, justifying any action as long as it served justice. What happened to him? He crossed the wrong line with the wrong person. Got himself killed trying to be judge, jury, and executioner. She looked up at Grant, and he saw tears she was fighting not to shed. I won't watch that happen again, especially not to someone I love. The admission stopped Grant cold. She loved him. Despite everything, despite her fear, despite the danger he was becoming, she loved him. So what do? We use the evidence. We let the system handle justice. We trust that sometimes the right way is enough. Grant looked at the files spread across the table, then at the woman who'd risked everything to save him. Clean justice versus personal vengeance. Safety versus satisfaction. The love of a woman who'd seen too much violence versus the hunger for total victory. And if it's not enough, if they find ways around the evidence, if they disappear into witness protection, if they hurt other people because we didn't stop them permanently, then at least we'll still be people worth loving. The choice stretched between them like a chasm. Grant could feel himself standing at the edge, looking down into darkness that promised power and satisfaction and the complete destruction of anyone who'd ever threatened them. All it would cost was the woman he loved and the man he'd been before he learned how good it felt to be feared. Have you ever had to choose between what felt right and what was right? When someone you loved asked you to be better than your instincts demanded. Tell me about your hardest moral choice in the comments. As thunder rolled outside the warehouse, Grant realized he was about to find out what mattered more, winning the war or keeping the woman who'd shown him how to fight it. 3 weeks later, Grant watched Marcus Webb get arrested on live television, and all he felt was empty. The FBI raid was thorough, professional, everything Tasha had promised it would be. Federal agents in bulletproof vests, evidence boxes carried out in neat rows, perp walks that would make the evening news for days. Justice served cold and clean. Feeling better? Tasha asked from beside him on the hotel bed. They'd been hiding in a midtown hotel while the legal machinery ground through their evidence. Clean sheets, room service, cable news, keeping them updated on the systematic destruction of their enemies. Safe, boring, exactly what Tasha had wanted. Sure, Grant lied. On screen, Marcus stumbled as agents guided him toward the waiting car. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the handcuffs and the certainty of spending the next 20 years in federal prison. The man who tried to steal Grant's empire was just another criminal now, reduced to a booking photo and a case number. The Russian assets were frozen this morning, Tasha continued, scrolling through news feeds on her laptop. Dmitry Volkov's already in custody, singing like a bird to reduce his sentence. Your ex-wife's lawyers are claiming she knew nothing about the conspiracy. Will that work? Probably. She was careful to stay one step removed from the actual crimes. Tasha's voice carried professional assessment rather than emotion. She'll lose the divorce settlement, but she won't do prison time. Grant nodded, processing information that should have brought satisfaction. Victoria would be financially ruined, but free. Marcus would spend decades behind bars. The Russians would face deportation and criminal charges in multiple countries. Complete victory, achieved without bloodshed or moral compromise. So why did he feel like something important had been stolen from him? Grant. Tasha's hand found his, fingers intertwining with familiar comfort. Talk to me. It's over. Yes. Isn't that what we wanted? Grant looked at her, really looked. 3 weeks of hiding had softened some of her edges, made her seem less like a weapon and more like a woman. She'd been sleeping better, eating regular meals, letting herself relax in ways he hadn't seen since they'd first met. She was happy with how things had ended. I keep thinking about the coffee shop, he said. When you threatened Marcus? When I saw real fear in his eyes. Grant turned away from the television, needing to see her face. For 30 seconds, he understood what it felt like to be powerless. to have someone else hold all the cards. Tasha's expression grew careful, guarded. And then nothing. He gets arrested, gets lawyers, gets due process. He never experiences the terror he put us through. Never feels what it's like to run for your life or watch someone you love get threatened. That's not how justice works. Maybe it should be. The admission hung between them like a loaded weapon. Tasha pulled her hand away, creating distance that felt like a physical blow. You're talking about revenge again. I'm talking about consequences that actually matter. Grant stood up, needing to move despite the hotel room's limitations. Marcus will be in minimum security prison, probably out in 12 years with good behavior. Meanwhile, I lost everything. My reputation, my business, 3 months of my life running from shadows. You'll get your reputation back. The frame-up evidence clears you completely. Will I get back the sleepless nights? The constant fear? The knowledge that people I trusted wanted me dead. Tasha was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with the intensity she usually reserved for tactical assessments. What do you want me to say? She asked finally. I want you to admit that maybe clean justice isn't enough. Maybe some people deserve to suffer the way they made others suffer. And then what? We become vigilantes? We decide who deserves punishment and how much. We appoint ourselves judge and jury. We already did that. Grant moved closer, drawn by the challenge in her voice. The moment we chose to gather evidence instead of calling police, we stepped outside the system. The moment you taught me to disappear, to fight back, to hunt them down, we became something other than law-abiding citizens. That's different, is it? Grant sat on the edge of the bed, close enough to see the conflict playing out in her eyes. Or is the only difference that you're comfortable with some kind of justice, but not others? Tasha stood up abruptly, moving to the window with the restless energy he recognized from their first night together. When she was stressed, she needed to see exits, assess threats, prepare for violence that might never come. I've seen what happens when good people decide the law isn't enough, she said without turning around. I've watched it destroy them from the inside. Your partner, my training officers, half the cops I worked with in Dallas. She pressed her palms against the glass, and Grant could see tension radiating through her frame. They all started with noble intentions. They all believed the system had failed, that they could do better. What if they were right? What if they weren't? She turned to face him, and Grant saw something that looked like desperation in her expression. What if becoming monsters to fight monsters just creates more monsters? What if letting monsters win because we're afraid of becoming like them just creates more victims? The question silenced her, and Grant knew he'd hit something fundamental. Tasha had spent years choosing the clean path, the safe path, the morally defensible path. But somewhere deep down, she knew it wasn't always enough. I can't watch you become someone I don't recognize, she said quietly. And I can't pretend to be satisfied with justice that feels like defeat. They stared at each other across the hotel room, and Grant realized they'd reached the real crossroads. Not the choice between legal evidence and violent revenge, but the choice between staying safe and staying together. So what happens now? Tasha asked. Grant looked at the television, where news anchors were already moving on to other stories. By tomorrow, the arrest of Marcus Webb would be old news. The man who destroyed his life would become a footnote, a case study, a cautionary tale about white-collar crime. But Grant would remember the terror, the helplessness, the knowledge that powerful people could destroy innocent lives without consequence. And he would remember that for 30 seconds in a coffee shop, he'd had the power to balance those scales. Now I decide whether being the man you can love is worth more than being the man who makes sure this never happens to anyone else. Have you ever had to choose between being good and being effective? Between satisfying justice and satisfying your conscience? When someone you loved asked you to be better than your anger, what did you choose? The hotel room fell silent except for the distant hum of the city, and Grant realized that some choices couldn't be postponed forever. The question was whether the woman who'd saved him could accept the man he was becoming, or if saving others would mean losing her forever. The call came at 3 a.m., 3 days after Marcus Webb's arrest, and Grant knew before answering that their clean victory was about to get complicated. They're dead. Tasha's voice was flat, emotionless, but Grant could hear something underneath that made his blood run cold. Who? The witnesses. All three people who were going to testify against the Russian money laundering operation. She was moving while she talked, the sound of equipment being packed filling the line. Car accident, home invasion, apparent suicide. All within 12 hours. Grant sat up in bed, instantly alert despite the early hour. They'd been staying in separate hotels since their argument, maintaining distance while the legal system processed their evidence. Dmitry, still in custody, but his partners aren't. Tasha's voice grew harder. The ones we never identified, the ones who stayed in the shadows while we focused on the visible threats. What does this mean for the case? Without witnesses, the prosecution falls apart. Marcus might walk on the money laundering charges. The Russians disappear back into the shadows. Your ex-wife's lawyers suddenly have room to maneuver. Grant felt familiar rage building in his chest, the kind that had driven him to threaten Marcus in the coffee shop. Clean justice was failing exactly as he predicted. Where are you? Packing. This hotel is compromised. Probably has been for days. The sounds of preparation grew more urgent. You need to move too. Now. Tasha. They know we're alive, Grant. They know we have evidence they can't afford to let surface. The polite phase of this war just ended. The line went dead, leaving Grant staring at his phone in the darkness of his hotel room. Through the windows, the city looked normal. Traffic lights cycling through their colors. Late-night pedestrians hurrying home. The ordinary rhythm of urban life continuing despite the violence lurking in its shadows. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Lobby. 2 minutes. Come alone or she dies. Grant's world tilted sideways. They had Tasha. He was dressed and moving before rational thought could interfere, gun tucked under his jacket, tactical knife strapped to his ankle. Every lesson she'd taught him about survival and violence flooding back with crystal clarity. The elevator ride felt eternal, but when the doors opened, the lobby was empty except for a single figure sitting in a chair near the windows. Dmitry Volkov should have been in federal custody. Mr. Winters. The Russian's accent was thicker in person, his smile cold as winter. Or do you prefer your new identity? The system has so many interesting records of people who don't exist. Where is she? Safe. For now. Dmitry gestured to the chair across from him. Seat. We have business to discuss. Grant remained standing, hand hovering near his weapon. The lobby's security cameras were dark, he noticed, either disabled or showing footage from different times. They were ghosts in this moment, invisible to any system that might later seek justice. How did you get out? Corruption is a beautiful thing, Mr. Winters. It makes the impossible merely expensive. Dmitry's smile widened. Your country's justice system is remarkably affordable for men with proper resources. What do you want? Originally, your assets, your connections, your legitimacy for my business operations. Dmitry stood up, and Grant realized the man was larger than he'd appeared on surveillance footage. But you've cost me considerable time and money. Now I want something more personal, which is, I want to watch you break. Before Grant could react, Dmitry was holding up a tablet showing live video feed. Tasha was zip-tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse basement, conscious but clearly injured. Blood from a head wound had dried on her face. She's quite impressive, Dmitry continued conversationally. Killed 2 of my men before they subdued her. Very professional technique. Grant's vision blurred with rage, so pure it felt like religious experience. The civilized man who tried to work within the system vanished completely, replaced by something primal and deadly. If you hurt her, you'll what? Call the police? File a lawsuit? Dmitry laughed, the sound echoing through the empty lobby. The old Grant Winters might have done that. But you're not him anymore, are you? No, Grant said quietly. I'm not. Good. Because she's counting on you to be someone different. Someone willing to do whatever it takes. Dmitry swiped to a new screen showing a countdown timer. 47 minutes and falling.
The building she's in has been rigged with enough explosives to level a city block. The timer is connected to my heartbeat. If I die, she dies. If I don't receive a specific code, every hour, she dies. If you involve law enforcement, she dies. What do you want? I want you to choose. Dimitri's eyes glittered with anticipation. Walk away now. Disappear forever. Let me complete my business operations without interference, and she lives. Try to save her, and you both die. Grant stared at the timer, watching precious seconds tick away while the woman he loved sat tied to a chair above enough explosives to erase her from existence. There's a third option, he said. Oh, Grant smiled, and he knew it was the most dangerous expression that had ever crossed his face. I kill everyone except you. Make you watch her die slowly, then spend the rest of your life in a basement somewhere learning about pain. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Dimitri's features. You're not that man. 3 weeks ago, you'd have been right. Grant took a step closer, and something in his movement made the Russian's hand drift toward his weapon. But the man I was 3 weeks ago never had someone worth killing for. The lobby fell silent except for the sound of their breathing and the distant hum of traffic outside. Two predators circling each other, measuring threat and opportunity. 45 minutes, Dimitri said. When everything you've tried to do the right way fails, when someone you love pays the price for your principles, how far are you willing to fall? Share your thoughts below about the moment you stopped being who you were and became who you needed to be. Grant realized that Tasha had been right to fear his transformation, but for the wrong reasons. She thought violence would corrupt him, make him into someone she couldn't love. But standing in that lobby, staring at a countdown timer connected to her life, Grant understood the truth. Love was what made violence sacred, and he was about to show Dmitri Volkov exactly how sacred Tasha Williams was to him. Grant had 43 minutes to save the woman he loved, and he was going to spend the first 5 making Dmitri Volkov understand the difference between business and war. You made an interesting choice of location, Grant said, moving closer with predatory calm. Hotel lobby, security cameras disabled, no witnesses. Almost like you wanted privacy for what comes next. Dimitri's hand moved toward his jacket, but Grant was faster. 3 weeks of training with a woman who'd survived hell had changed more than just his mindset. It had rewired his reflexes, his spatial awareness, his relationship with violence itself. The gun skittered across marble floors as Dimitri gasped, clutching his wrist where Grant had applied pressure with surgical precision. 42 minutes, Grant said, picking up the weapon. Let's make them count. You cannot torture information from me. I'm the only one who knows the location. I'm not going to torture you. Grant ejected the magazine, checked the chamber, found what he expected. I'm going to give you a choice that's much worse. He handed the empty gun back to Dimitri, who stared at it like it might explode. What is this? Your weapon. Unloaded, but your men won't know that from a distance. Grant pulled out his phone, showing Dimitri a screen full of contact information. I spent the last 3 days learning about your operation. Partners, lieutenants, the addresses where they hide their families. Understanding dawned in Dimitri's eyes, followed immediately by fear. You are bluffing. Am I? Grant scrolled through the contacts, each name representing hours of research, surveillance, careful planning. Alexei Petrov lives in Brooklyn Heights with his wife and 2 daughters. Mikhail Kozlov has a gambling problem and a boyfriend his partners don't know about. Viktor Resnick sends money to his sick mother in Moscow every month. How did you? The same way you found my pressure points. I found yours. Grant stepped back, giving Dimitri space to move. Here's your choice. Call them off. Give me Tasha's location. Walk away clean. Or try to run with that empty gun and watch me systematically destroy every person who ever mattered to you. My partners will never. Your partners think you're compromised. 3 of their witnesses are dead, their money laundering operation is blown, and their inside man just got arrested on national television. Grant's smile was sharp as broken glass. How long before they decide you're a liability? Dimitri looked at the phone in his hand, then at the empty gun, then at Grant's face. Whatever he saw there made his shoulders slump with defeat. The warehouse district, Pier 47, building with the red door. Security? 6 men, Rotating patrol, radio check every 15 minutes. Explosives? C4, remotely detonated. The detonator is in my car. Grant held out his hand. Keys. If I give you this, I am dead man. My partners. Your partners are going to be too busy running from federal agents to worry about you. Grant's voice carried absolute certainty. The evidence we gathered doesn't just implicate Marcus and the money laundering operation. It connects to arms dealing, human trafficking, enough charges to put your entire organization away for life. The witnesses are dead. The original witnesses are dead. But we kept insurance. Grant pulled up a secure server on his phone, showing terabytes of encrypted data. Financial records, surveillance footage, recorded conversations. Everything necessary to rebuild the case from scratch. Dimitri's face went pale. You knew they would be killed. Tasha suspected it. She prepared for it. Grant felt something twist in his chest. Pride mixed with grief for the woman who'd planned contingencies even while hoping for the best. She never trusted that clean justice would be enough. Then why did you not act sooner? Because she asked me not to. Because I was trying to be the man she could love instead of the man who could keep her safe. The admission hung between them like a confession. Grant realized that his greatest mistake hadn't been threatening Marcus or wanting revenge. It had been choosing Tasha's moral comfort over her physical safety. The keys, he repeated. Dimitri handed them over, his movements slow and defeated. You will kill them all. Only if they resist. They will resist. I know. Grant checked his watch. 37 minutes. Which is why I'm not going in alone. Before Dimitri could ask what that meant, the lobby filled with armed figures in tactical gear. Federal agents, but not the clean-cut bureaucrats who'd arrested Marcus. These were the specialists who handled situations too dangerous for conventional law enforcement. Mr. Winters, the team leader said, voice muffled by his tactical mask. Agent Martinez, FBI hostage rescue team. We're here to assist. Grant looked at the coordinated response, the professional weapons and equipment, the kind of backup that suggested extensive planning and official sanction. Tasha arranged this. Insurance policy, she called it. If clean justice failed, dirty justice would have proper supervision. Grant felt his throat tighten with emotion he didn't have time to process. Even while fearing his transformation, Tasha had prepared for the possibility that violence would be necessary. She found a way to give him the tools for revenge while keeping him from becoming a monster. 35 minutes, Agent Martinez said. We're moving now. As they headed toward the parking garage, Grant realized Tasha had been playing a longer game than either of them understood. She hadn't been choosing between justice and revenge. She'd been preparing to make both possible while keeping the man she loved from losing himself completely. What would you sacrifice to save someone you loved? How far would you trust them to make the right choice, even if you couldn't bear to watch? Tell me about the hardest act of faith in your life. The convoy pulled out into the night, carrying Grant toward either salvation or destruction, and he realized that the woman tied to a chair in a warehouse had been protecting him from himself even while he'd been learning to protect her from the world. The warehouse at Pier 47 looked like every other abandoned building in the district, but Grant could see the subtle signs Tasha had taught him to recognize. 2 clean windows, recent tire tracks, the way shadows fell wrong around the corners where guards were positioned. Thermal imaging shows 6 hostiles, 1 hostage, 2nd floor center room. Agent Martinez whispered through the comm. Explosive signature consistent with military-grade C4, but the detonator isn't active. Grant checked Dimitri's remote detonator, confirming what the agent had said. Dead battery, either incompetence or insurance. Dimitri had wanted the threat to be believable, but not necessarily lethal. Entry plan, standard hostage rescue. We go in fast, neutralize threats, extract the victim. You stay back until... No! Grant's voice carried authority that surprised even him. She's in there because of me. I'm going first. Sir, with respect, you're not trained for her. I'm trained by her. Grant checked his weapon, feeling the familiar weight that had become as natural as breathing. And I know how she thinks, how she moves, what she'll do when the shooting starts. Agent Martinez studied Grant's face through his tactical mask, measuring competence against liability. You follow orders. You don't improvise. You don't play hero. Understood. But as they moved toward the building, Grant knew he was lying. When it came to Tasha's safety, he would do whatever was necessary. Orders and training be damned. The entry was textbook perfect. Coordinated breaches, flashbangs that turn night into temporary day. The precise violence of professionals who'd done this dance countless times before. Grant followed the team through smoke and chaos, every sense hyper-alert, searching for any sign of the woman who'd become more important to him than his own survival. They found her exactly where thermal imaging had indicated, zip-tied to a chair, but conscious, alert, alive. Blood from her head wound had dried, but her eyes were clear and focused when they met his across the room. "About time," she said. Grant's knees nearly gave out with relief. Even injured, even tied up, even surrounded by explosives, Tasha Williams was still the strongest person he'd ever met. "You okay?" "I've been better." She looked past him at the federal agents securing the room. "Insurance policy worked, I see. You planned this." "I planned for this." Her voice carried exhaustion and pain, but also something that sounded like pride. "The moment you threatened Marcus, I knew we'd need backup for the backup plan." Agent Martinez cut her restraints with efficient movements, but when Tasha tried to stand, she swayed dangerously. Grant was there immediately, catching her before she could fall. "Easy," he said, supporting her weight. "We've got you." "Building's clear," came the report through their comms. 6 hostiles neutralized, no civilian casualties. Explosives were inactive, dead man's switch never armed. Grant looked at Tasha, seeing understanding pass between them. Dimitri had been running a bluff, counting on fear and time pressure to make Grant do something desperate and stupid. "He never intended to kill me," Tasha said, "just to break me." Grant helped her toward the exit, moving slowly to accommodate her injuries. "Make me choose between saving you and staying sane." Did it work? Grant considered the question as they walked through the warehouse, past zip-tied prisoners and evidence markers being placed by crime scene technicians. Had it worked? Had Dimitri succeeded in breaking the man Grant had been? "I was ready to torture information out of him," Grant admitted. "I was ready to hunt down his partners and their families. I was ready to become everything you were afraid I'd become. But you didn't, because you gave me another option." They reached the exit, where ambulances waited with flashing lights and medical personnel who immediately took charge of Tasha's care. "You made sure I could choose violence without choosing to become a monster." Tasha gripped his hand as EMTs checked her pupils and blood pressure, her fingers intertwining with his despite the chaos around them. "I couldn't watch you become someone I didn't recognize," she said softly. "But I also couldn't let you lose me because you were too good to do what was necessary. So you found a way to let me be both. I found a way to keep us both alive." She squeezed his hand tighter. "The question is, what happens now?" Grant looked around at the federal agents, the evidence being collected, the systematic dismantling of the criminal organization that had tried to destroy them. Clean justice backed by controlled violence. Legal process enabled by tactical precision. Now we go home. Where's home? The question stopped him. Grant realized that the penthouse overlooking Manhattan felt like a museum of his former life, a monument to the man he'd been before everything changed. He couldn't imagine going back to that sterile space, that isolated existence. "Wherever you are," he said. Tasha smiled despite her injuries, and Grant saw something in her expression that looked like relief mixed with love and the bone-deep exhaustion that came after surviving something that should have killed them both. "Good answer." As they loaded her into the ambulance, Grant realized that saving Tasha had required becoming someone different. Not the monster he'd feared becoming, but not the helpless victim he'd been either. Someone harder than his old self, but still soft enough for love. Someone willing to use violence, but not consumed by it. Someone worthy of the woman who'd risked everything to save him from himself. When you love someone enough to change who you are, how do you know when you've changed too much? How do you find the balance between being strong enough to protect them and staying gentle enough to love them? Share your thoughts about love and transformation below. 6 months later, Grant would look back on this moment as the night he learned the difference between being saved and being redeemed. But right now, all that mattered was the woman holding his hand and the knowledge that they'd survived something that should have destroyed them both. 1 year later, Grant stood in the conference room of the Tasha Williams Foundation for Justice Reform, watching his wife brief a room full of federal prosecutors on the systematic failures that had nearly gotten them both killed. Wife. The word still sent electricity through his chest. The problem isn't that the system doesn't work, Tasha was saying, gesturing to charts that showed conviction rates, witness protection failures, and the revolving door between organized crime and legitimate business. The problem is that it only works for people who can afford to make it work. She moved through the presentation with the same deadly precision she'd once brought to weapons training, but now her target was institutional corruption instead of individual threats. Grant watched prosecutors take notes, saw them nodding at statistics that painted a damning picture of justice for sale. Mrs. Winters raises valid points, said District Attorney Catherine Shun, a woman whose reputation for integrity had survived 30 years of New York politics. But systemic reform takes time. Years, maybe decades. People don't have decades, Tasha replied. The next Marcus Webb is already out there, identifying his targets, building his network, preparing to destroy lives while the system catches up to reality. Grant felt pride swell in his chest as he watched her work. The warrior who'd save his life had become something even more dangerous, a reformer with intimate knowledge of how easily justice could be bought, sold, or simply ignored. Which brings us to the Foundation's proposal, Grant said, stepping forward to join the presentation. He'd changed too, in ways that went deeper than the scars on his knuckles or the tactical awareness that had become second nature. The billionaire who'd built an empire through pure capitalism had learned that some things were more valuable than profit margins. Hybrid justice, he continued, pulling up financial projections that showed sustainable funding for witness protection, victim advocacy, and systematic corruption investigation. Public resources backed by private funding, legal process supported by protective services. Vigilante justice with government oversight. D.H. asked, skepticism clear in her voice. Professional justice with adequate resources, Tasha corrected. The system works when it has the tools it needs. We're proposing to provide those tools. Grant watched the room's energy shift as prosecutors realized they were being offered resources they'd never had before. The ability to protect witnesses, investigate leads that required expensive surveillance, pursue cases without worrying about budget constraints. The Winters case study, continued Agent Martinez, who joined the Foundation as Director of Operations after taking early retirement from the FBI. 6 months of investigation, 17 arrests, complete dismantling of a money laundering operation that had been running for 8 years. And no casualties, added Dr. Sarah Kim, the therapist who'd helped both Grant and Tasha process the psychological aftermath of their ordeal. Proof that controlled intervention can achieve better outcomes than either pure legal process or uncontrolled vigilante action. Grant looked at Tasha, catching her eye across the conference table. They'd built this together. Not just the Foundation, but the relationship that had survived transformation, violence, and the kind of pressure that destroyed most couples before their first anniversary. She was still dangerous. He'd learned to be dangerous too. But they found ways to channel that danger into something constructive, something that protected other people instead of just themselves. Questions? Tasha asked the room. D.A. Chin leaned forward. What happens when you encounter someone who can't be reformed through legal channels? Someone like Dmitry Volkov, who views corruption as a business model. Grant and Tasha exchanged a look that held entire conversations. They'd had this discussion countless times, in therapy and in private, working through the moral complexities of controlled violence and justified intervention. We have contingency protocols, Grant said carefully. Supervised, legal, with appropriate oversight and accountability. Translation. You still know how to fight when fighting becomes necessary, Chin said. We know how to win when winning protects innocent people, Tasha corrected. The difference is that we're not doing it alone anymore. The meeting ended with handshakes, business cards, and the promise of follow-up conversations. Grant watched prosecutors file out, several of them already deep in discussion about cases that could benefit from the Foundation's resources. When the room was empty, except for them, Tasha moved to the windows overlooking the city. Grant joined her, looking out at the maze of lights and shadows that had once seemed like a battleground but now felt like home. "Think they'll accept the proposal?" he asked. "They need us too much to say no." She leaned against his shoulder, comfortable with the casual intimacy that had replaced their earlier desperate hunger. "The question is whether we're ready for what comes next." "What comes next?"
More cases, more people who need protecting, more situations where the system isn't enough and we have to decide how far we're willing to go. Grant wrapped his arms around her, feeling the solid warmth of the woman who'd saved his life and then taught him how to save others. Together, always together. Through the windows, the city pulsed with its eternal rhythms: crime and justice, power and corruption, people trying to survive, and occasionally finding love worth fighting for. Grant and Tasha had become part of that rhythm, protectors and reformers, warriors who'd learned when to fight and when to build. "Mrs. Winters," Grant said against her ear. "Mr. Winters," she replied, turning in his arms. When they kissed, it carried the weight of everything they'd survived and everything they'd chosen to become. Not the desperate hunger of people who might not survive the night, but the deep satisfaction of partners who'd found their purpose. What would you build if you could turn your worst experience into protection for others? When you found love worth changing for, what did you become? Share your story of transformation and purpose below. Outside their windows, New York continued its eternal dance of light and shadow, and somewhere in that maze, people who needed protecting were about to discover that justice sometimes came with backup, resources, and two people who remembered exactly what it felt like to be powerless. The chokehold that had started everything had become something else entirely, an embrace that protected not just each other, but everyone they could reach.